Still, more than 1 billion people live in urban poverty.
I love the Hult Prize because it changes people. It makes people dream again. It makes people want to work together to create a better world. And it encourages people to be entrepreneurs who never thought they could.
So what you'll see today is a year's worth of hard work, time which has been spent setting a new precedence to what the enterprise of the future looks like.
Transportation is the bridge to opportunities.
In Mexico, only 10% of the recyclable waste is actually being recycled.
We're Simprints, a low-cost biometric solution that uses people's natural identifiers.
An e-commerce platform that connects micro-entrepreneurs to the global market.
We are what every street food vendor needs.
I'm looking for something that has more transformative power.
I think solving social problems have to be business solutions.
You're not just rewarding a business, you're rewarding a business that can go to scale.
I always love this night. Every one of these proposals has tremendous potential. The winner is Magic Bus.
To make Magic Bus available to millions of people and change their lives.
We are the generation of change.
Okay, so that was our intro video, just to give you an idea. Some of the facts were a little off for this year, but just to give you an idea of how the Hult Prize works, I'll jump right into our agenda. So I'll be giving you a quick introduction about Hult Prize, how it works at the University of Waterloo. As Rupa mentioned, my name is Pragya Dawadi and I am the campus director, so I'll be answering any questions that you have, or hopefully, yeah, that's it. That's all I'll be doing. And like organizing the semifinals and finals, but and then Rupa will come up again and give you sort of a social entrepreneurship context, how that falls in. Then we have two amazing speakers, Nigel Moore and Uche Onuora. I did practice that. And they'll give you a context on the challenge and their experiences with energy. And then we'll have a Q&A panel at the end. So the Hult Prize is the world's largest student competition for social entrepreneurship. The big tagline that catches everyone's eyes is $1 million, and yes, there is a chance right at the end to pitch for $1 million, but I'll talk you through the steps of how you get there. So the Hult Prize at University of Waterloo is actually a quarterfinal round. So you start off here. If you win the University of Waterloo round, then you move on to the regionals. Last year it was only 5 cities. This year it is one of 15, and Toronto has actually made the list, which is really cool. But if you're like me, you probably want to go somewhere else, not Toronto. But you do get to rank your choices once you win. Something that I'll actually mention there is that the winner of the University of Waterloo round gets an automatic entry. You bypass 50,000 other entries and you get to one of these regionals. Last year, we actually had, I think, 2 or 3 more teams that also made it to the regionals. Once you compete at the University of Waterloo on-campus competition, if you don't win, you can still apply to an online general round. That's where I said it's like 50,000 people, but as your campus director, I will put in a favorable word for you saying, this team competed here, so suck up to me as you wish. And I'll put in a word for you, and now that there are 15 cities, I hope to see at least one Waterloo team at each city. I also said, and I know that'll come true, because last year I stood in front of a group and I said, we're gonna make it to the finals, and we did, thanks to me. So I'm gonna assume that's gonna come true again. Once you make it through the regionals, last year there was only 8 teams, I think. This year they are selecting 50 teams to go to a castle in London, the Hult Castle, for an accelerator program for 8 weeks. If that doesn't get you excited, I'm just gonna stop my presentation now. Once you're there for these 8 weeks, you get weekly workshops, hands-on mentorship, and honestly, when they say industry leaders here, they mean industry leaders. Like, Hult has connections with the United Nations, Hult, Bill Gates Foundation. No, that's wrong. Bill Clinton, the Clinton Foundation, all of that. So you really get an amazing experience there. You also get to go on the ground, test your ideas in the countries that you want to implement them in, as well as team building opportunities. So I said there are going to be 50 different teams selected, and these teams are from all around the world. And then the global finals. So this is actually a year-long process. So the on-campus rounds will be over by December. Then the regional rounds are in March. The summer accelerator for 8 weeks are in like June, July. And then next September, you'll pitch at the global finals, and you'll have Bill Clinton kind of present the next year's challenge as well as the winners. And this year, Bill Clinton announced the challenge as harnessing the power of energy. So you'll hear that phrase a lot, and we'll have more speakers on it. I don't know that much about energy, but I can answer Hult Prize questions. So, going into that, for you guys, what you should do now is there is a challenge available. So a nice thing about this entrepreneurship challenge is that you don't need to figure out what the problem is necessarily. It's energy, and but the challenge does help you narrow down sort of focus areas. It's a comprehensive guide on the problem. A lot of research has been put into it, and it's provided to you from the Hult Prize organizers. The next step would be recruiting a team. So in order to compete in this pitch competition, you need 3 to 4 people in your team, all from the University of Waterloo, but they can be from any faculty and any year of the program, first year to PhD candidates. And you can also have up to 1 alumni in your team. And if you want more information on that, we are trying to find a way to connect you guys to alumni or see which alumni are available and want to help, so I can give you more information about that later. The next thing would be to register your team online. So if you follow Hult Prize, there are different websites being popped up and advertised here and there. The ones that you want to go to is hultprizeat.com/Waterloo. There's also a Facebook page and stuff, I'll get to that, but that's where you kind of want to get your information and register your teams. And then we're going to have a few rounds where you pitch your startup idea. So getting into that, some important dates for you guys. I don't know who that is. So 15th of November is the team registration deadline. I would really, really encourage you guys to, as soon as you have a team, make it real, register. All you need for registration really is your team members' names, email, and a brief description of like who you are, what programs are you in, something like that. But by the 15th of November, we would like a video pitch entry as well. From that, all the details about the pitches and the times and what to expect will come over the next few weeks. But from that 15th of November video pitch, teams will then be selected for 22nd of November. All these days are on Wednesdays, I believe. The 22nd of November is the semifinals. You pitch in front of 3 judges. And once again, those details will come out in a few weeks. And then the 29th of November is the University of Waterloo finals. So it'll be 3 judges again. And that would be the day that you find out if you're going to one of those 15 cities. In addition to that, we're trying to help you guys. So we have the kickoff event today. We're also going to have a design thinking workshop. So this is actually, I know there's a lot of Bet 420 kids in here. It will be in that class, so space is limited, and I encourage you guys at the end of this session, I will have a Google form up with me. Please do come and sign up if you want to attend this design thinking workshop. It would be beneficial to probably have your teams and a kind of idea before October 18th maybe while you attend that, but Rupa will explain more about that as it is her class. And then the 2nd of November, we're going to try to connect you guys for a speed mentoring session. So at this point, the idea is you guys have an idea of what you want to do, you have your teams formed, and you're going to look to people in the industry for feedback and advice, see what you're missing, how to make your pitches better. That's basically all from me. This will be up again, but really please go give Hult at Waterloo on Facebook a like. That's where you'll get all your updates, all your information. You can register at hultprizeat.com Waterloo, and if you have any questions, if you happen to find my personal email, fine, email me there. But if not, it's hultprizeuw@gmail.com. With that, I'd like to give it off to Rupa. She's a lecturer, most of you know, as I said, because you're in her class, but at the Conrad's Business and Entrepreneurship Technology Center, and she's going to give you a little information about social entrepreneurship.
Okay, hello, and thank you, Pragya, for that great enthusiastic overview of Hult. How many of you are already excited to participate in Hult? Okay, everybody in my class, please, thank you, hands up. Why are some of you still thinking about it? Okay, well, we are very excited this year to kick off the 2018 Hult competition with this launch, and Pragya and I have been connecting quite a bit on some of the details, so we hope that you enjoy it. Now, I'm here, as Pragya mentioned, to set a little bit of the tone for how we view social entrepreneurship here at the University of Waterloo, more specifically at Conrad, and I'm very grateful to be teaching BET 420 this year, and especially because it's the first year that we are integrating Hult so fundamentally with the course, so we've, as those of you who are in the class have been experiencing already, we've already been workshopping and struggling with concepts in social entrepreneurship as we lead into this very much hands-on challenge. So we're very excited about that. So today I'm going to touch on what is social entrepreneurship, just a quick overview, why Hult, and how we suggest you approach this challenge, like what next and where to go from here. Thank you. So I like having this opening quote, which my students have seen already, but that's great. Sometimes the second time is even better. And it's by Bill Drayton, the founder of Ashoka Changemakers. And he has said, social entrepreneurs are not content just to give a fish or to teach how to fish. They will not rest until they have revolutionized the fishing industry. And I really like that quote for a few reasons. The main thing is it draws our attention to this idea that at their core, social entrepreneurs and social ventures are meant to change systems. They are meant to revolutionize industries, and that sets them apart in their intent, at least, from just giving a fish, so to speak, so what we see as traditional charity models. It also sets them apart from teaching how to fish, which is also valuable in development. We talk a lot about capacity building efforts and involving people in that process, and so skills building is super important, but when you move into revolutionizing industries and changing systems, that's where we are really shifting things in society. And I think that's a critical starting point for those of you as well, aspiring to be social entrepreneurs. Okay, so what is social entrepreneurship? This is more challenging than this kind of bland slide indicates, and that's because it is difficult to define. Even across campus, those of you who are connected to other faculties, you will hear faculty members describe social entrepreneurship in different ways, and we are aware of that, and there's research that has been ongoing and emerging, but at their core, people agree that social entrepreneurship, the focus of it is mission-related impact. So social entrepreneurs are not out just to seek profit. It doesn't mean that you can't have ventures that are for profit. There are several of those, and we'll get to that. But their motive is driven socially. So you're looking at moving beyond profit and really looking at developing social value. That's a whole nother conversation of how do we measure social value and how do we get to that level of impact. Those are deeper conversations. Oh, sorry. That's all right. And then another critical point I wanted to point out here is this idea of addressing market failures and suboptimal equilibriums. It's a mouthful, but how many of you have taken any econ classes in the past? Yeah, okay, great. So did I. So it reminds me of kind of econ, I don't remember the course code at Laurier, but econ something, 101, where you look at, the supply and demand curves and where they meet. And then you have, like, if some people are nodding, right? You have supply and demand meeting that gives you this optimal price point and quantity of goods that would be sold, right? But unfortunately, that market isn't perfect. And so there are market failures, which refer to situations where there is a subgroup or subset of a population that could be made much better off without others being made worse off. And these are market failures. So some people call climate change one of the biggest market failures of our time. You look at market failures in areas like education and health, where people just do not have access to basic services in those areas. So this helps point us to the need for social entrepreneurs. Not just that it's a big, exciting area to work in, but there's also a big need here. Suboptimal equilibriums refer to situations where, and other entrepreneurs address these as well, where things are kind of working but not working so well. So it's like the analogy that one of our readings used was, it's like in this classroom, if we're feeling a little chilly, what would be the ideal solution to that problem? What would you do to rectify that? It's too cold in the room. Yes. Turn up the heat, right? Pretty simple. But if we're not able to turn up the heat, then you may just throw on a couple extra layers. And people do that, and they adjust to whatever they need to adjust to, but it doesn't mean it's optimal. And so entrepreneurs also try and tackle those kinds of situations in their ventures. The other few points, the main thing is that there is also accountability to a broader group of stakeholders, almost by design. Social entrepreneurs are looking to impact lives and create social value. Beneficiaries, or your end users, aren't always the ones who are paying your bills. And so that already adds a layer of people that you are serving that aren't necessarily directly part of your revenue model. And so this is where we need to get creative and innovative with how we design our business models, and we'll get to that later. The other few points are common to other entrepreneurs as well, this idea that you need to move beyond the resources in your own pocket and start learning how to connect to other resources, whether that's on campus or beyond. And the other thing with social enterprise is there's no one legal form that is kind of common across the board. You use a legal form that makes sense for you, which leads us into what does the landscape look like? You can go one more further, perfect. So here we see the squiggly line that I used, created on Keynote, so you can see it's not very professional. It's done by yours truly. But I used a squiggly line and not one of their straight arrows because I personally don't see this as a linear kind of division between the different forms or types of businesses that are operating in this space or trying to get involved in social engagement. So we have examples here to help sort of paint the picture, so to speak, and show you what we mean by hybrids. So on one end, you think of models like the Royal Bank of Canada is definitely a for-profit business, and so you can see that they also have initiatives in this space. You look at some of their big CSR, corporate social responsibility initiatives. So currently one of theirs involves donating to several charities that deal with water access and clean water. But that doesn't change the core of what they do. They are a for-profit company, and they do kind of donate to charities to do their part, right? So that's, you have to understand that that's a certain type of business model that they have. Now, when we move along, I'll jump to the other side. If you look at Plan Canada or Plan International, they are an NGO that has charitable status, so there is overlap there. And NGOs tend to be active in the advocacy, activism space, as well as lean towards a charity model. And we talked about in class, some of you may remember, those in 420, not our MBETs and others, that there are these hybrid models that are in this landscape. So something like Plan International falls in that space of being kind of leaning towards that charity model, and yeah, so that's Plan. It gets more interesting when we get to the other two types of business models, in my opinion. So you look at Grameen Bank, which is housed right under social enterprise there. So Grameen Bank was founded by Muhammad Yunus, of course, a Nobel Prize-winning economist, and it started with him giving a $27 loan to rural women in Bangladesh, and has grown into this huge, scalable model, which is Grameen Bank, and it spans countries. And the reason why that is seen as such a strong example of social business within social enterprise is that Grameen doesn't just target women in rural areas who could have access to microloans. It includes them very fundamentally in their model of how they do things. So women are not just beneficiaries of that, They are the reason why that model sustains. They are the reason why it became scalable. They keep each other accountable. You have groups of 6 women who hold each other accountable to these loans and help each other if there's a risk of default. And they have an incredibly successful repayment rate. So this is something that's seen as quite a successful model of social business and scalable as well. So it's financially sustainable also. Now, the other one that we've talked about is Tom's, and we joked about how we talked about this for about 20 minutes in my class, so we said we would never talk about it again except for today. And that is because we had we had some debate and discussion around what kind of model does Tom's have. If you look at it from a purely, is their mission social, is there social impact at their core, then you would answer yes, and we could move on. But if you dig a little deeper and look at what their revenue model looks like, if you think about it, Tom's charges, let's say, $60 for a pair of their shoes to customers like ourselves, and then they donate 1 pair of shoes. It's a buy one, give one model to people in certain developing countries, right? So if you look at that, that's a hybrid between having the social mission at its core, but also on the back end using a bit more of a charity model. And so there are consequences to that. It affects local markets. These are just thoughts to kind of keep in mind or consider as you try and shape your ideas for this year's challenge. Okay, so why Hult? So you can go to the next slide. That was a quick one. So when I think of Hult, and it's not just about Hult here, but it's this idea of students like yourselves being able to tackle real problems that are happening in the world. And to me, setting aside Hult, this kind of learning is what I feel is the future of higher education. I think that we need to be plugging skill sets, like the bright students that we have here, all of you, into problems that matter, and giving you some scope to how that can be done. So this idea of having real problems is one, I think, great thing that Hult gives us. Thinking big, but starting small. I think the other thing, one of my friends did his master's in design and social innovation, and the master's dissertation title was, "The World is Doomed, Let's Make Apps." Right? So, and OCAD, he studied at OCAD, they tried to get him to change the title, and he said, no, I won't change it, and I think it's kind of hilarious, and it's now on our reading list for about 420, partly because of the title. But this idea of, like, we can think bigger than creating a food delivery app. We can move beyond some of the ideas that tend to come out of classrooms. But at the same time, we can start small with the teams, with the resources, with the fantastic ecosystem that's here at the University of Waterloo, which leads into our focus areas. So this year, the interesting thing with Hult is that they have said, you will read the challenge booklet, Pragya pointed to it, it's on the Hult website. It's a 44-page document. And they help you see that there's different ways you can focus your approach to this challenge. And those areas are connectivity, mobility, food, water, health, and education. So you can pair something that you are interested in with the impact of, addressing this global energy issue. Okay, so finally, how do we start? Where do we go from here? We will be using a design thinking process in BET 420, and this is why for our design thinking sprint on October 18th, I invite others of you who are interested to sign up on the Google form that Pragya has set up, because we have a capacity of that classroom. And the idea is moving into in that inspiration space. This is what those of you who are familiar with design thinking, how many of you is that? I'm guessing at least those of you, yeah, but okay, it looks like 25 to 30% of you. There are steps in here. There's another visual that says define and empathize. So that's the phase that we're in now. Really getting to know the problem, understanding the context, developing empathy for people that you will be serving and working with. Such a huge and important part of this. And then we'll be moving into ideating, and this is where the design thinking sprint will help us get started on that front once we've really delved into the problem and you've chosen a focus area with your team. And finally, the prototyping and test part of design thinking comes in this last space. For those of you who get serious about this challenge and this competition or your own ventures, you will be moving into that closer to the end of this year and into the new year. And this is kind of an iterative process. It's not like one phase ends and then you never think about understanding the problem again, right? And this is why we call them spaces. Okay, and then the other tool that I think is super relevant that we've introduced is systems thinking. And another quote that I like is this idea of being able to see both the entire forest, but at the same time, being able to understand the details of those individual trees. So systems thinking is about looking at whole systems, understanding their component parts, and the relationship between the two. So when we look at complex problems like those that we will face in the global energy access space, it's really valuable to be able to take a step back and say, okay, what are all of the systems and players that are involved here? And what are the little levers or components that we can try and play with or understand that could shift the outcome of this problem? And so that's another tool that we will be using that I encourage you to also look into. I have students who've been teaching me about complex systems from an engineering perspective. It's fascinating and I think very applicable to these problems. Okay, and then the last thing that we'll be looking at is how do we then turn all of this into a business model, or at least start shaping business models that have realistic revenue models, understanding of costs, etc. And so we will get into this towards the end of the semester as we are getting ready for the challenge, for the finals, and semis. Okay, so what I encourage you to do next over the Thanksgiving week, I would really get to know the problem, so dig into that 44-page document. There's lots of images and colors, so it's a more pleasurable read than 44 pages sounds at the outset. You know, you can highlight the areas that are interesting to you and the strands that you and your group would like to focus on. We do have that design thinking sprint the week after Thanksgiving week. So if you'd like to sign up, you can do so at the end, and then start thinking about systems thinking and business models as you move on. Perfect. I'm going to hand it back to Pragya. Thank you.
If we could just clap for it. Before I introduce Nigel, if anyone's sitting at the back or standing, if you guys want to move up, there are lots of seats here. Just suggestion, we still have about an hour and a half. I don't know if you want to stand through the whole thing. So to introduce Nigel, Nigel Moore is the Manager of Global Programs and Initiatives at the Waterloo Institute for Sustainable Energy. He is a graduate of Waterloo's Environment and Business program and has worked previously at the Center for International Governance and Innovation in Waterloo, as well as the University of Oxford and the Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies in Potsdam, Germany, as a climate energy researcher. So please welcome Nigel as he talks a bit about his work with the Affordable Energy for Humanity initiative and the Open Access Energy Blueprint that he co-authored.
Thank you very much. All right. Thanks, everybody. I'm excited to be here, and I've written all over my notes pages with other things I want to tell you guys that you need to know, because there's so much to do in such a ridiculously short amount of time. But I'll try to keep more or less on message. So yeah, you know who I am. I won't waste time on that. It's a big challenge. What I'm going to talk about is some of the context, but I don't think actually all of the context. So we're talking about energy innovations that can change the lives of 10 million people. They could be 10 million people in Canada. I'm not going to, well, there are some people in Canada that I'll talk about, but for the most part, I'm going to focus on the people for whom energy is the most important, those living with a lack of access to energy services. And I think thinking about energy in that sort of sense and what you can do to design a business model, a social enterprise around that space is where you'll be able to have the most sort of impact. That's where we need to put our focus, because that's where we actually change lives. So that's what I'm going to talk about. So just some brief sort of overview of some of the scope. There's over 1 billion people on the planet that don't have access to electricity at all. 2.6 billion who don't have access to clean cooking facilities, who cook usually inside their home on open fires. We have all sorts of health impacts from these sort of things. Indoor air pollution actually kills more people every year, or leads to more premature deaths every year than AIDS and malaria combined. And all sorts of health, different human impacts, from a lack of access to electricity to high quality energy. And of course, addressing climate change requires us to solve this problem with clean technologies, with high technologies for people at the base of the pyramid. So what is energy poverty? And I think one way to think about it is as a theft of time. So the burden of collecting firewood and other sorts of traditional sorts of fuel falls disproportionately on women and young girls. It can take 6 to 8 hours per day to collect all the traditional energy fuels that families will use. And this is a trap, right? This is a trap that keeps people from having enough time to pursue economically productive activities and the sort of things that can get them out of poverty. So you got to think about energy as this liberating force that can be like a medium of exchange for human time, which is a key resource that the poor in the world have. They have their time, but it's being stolen by the fact that they don't have, that they have to spend it on all of this. So what is the opportunity? I think access to energy and to the services that it can provide in all those areas that we talked about, mobility, health, what have you, it provides an opportunity for economic empowerment for people to get out of the trap of poverty. A lot of these people are smallholder farmers, and so here you see some sort of agriculture-based examples, right? The guy over here has access to the world on his phone, right? He can tap into markets and all this sort of stuff. I mean, these are all energy technologies that are being used here. It's also a multiplier of the Sustainable Development Goals. I don't want to talk a whole lot about the Sustainable Development Goals. I think you can, probably a lot of you know a lot about them. But access to energy underlies our progress on a whole host of those. And this is the reason why I think that access to energy and the clean energy challenge for the bottom billion on the planet is a make or break for sustainable development, right? If we can't solve that, we're not going to get there on development, and we're not going to get there on sustainability, or one of the two, and so we can't really do it. Development as well, and just people becoming richer and living better lives, multiplies the amount of energy that we need, right? So what this causes is it means that if we live in a world where the world develops on a good path and people are starting to get out of poverty, we'll need by 2050 twice as much primary energy as we use today. If we do really well in development and we get to the prosperous world that we all want, we'll need 3 times as much energy. And what that means is that if that energy isn't provided through clean technologies, we will fail on climate change, right? So it is absolutely imperative that we look at emerging markets where people need high quality energy services to live a better life, but also look at that through the lens of needing clean tech, right? We have to use clean technology, or else there's just no way that we're going to meet both development and climate targets. So that's some of the overall why is this important sort of stuff. And that's why I call access to clean and affordable energy the quintessential part of the development challenge. We have to have success on both of the pillars, the affordability side, so that people actually have energy, and also on the emissions side, right, so that we make good on sustainability promises and these sorts of things. So the next thing I want to talk about is, I mean, it would strike you probably, and you might have read on one of the slides there, that this is a problem in sub-Saharan Africa and developing Asia and Latin America and this sort of thing. And that is where about 95% of the people who live without energy access live. However, there are pockets of energy poverty all over the world, including a significant problem that we face in Canada. So in Canada there are, and I would love it if we had some student teams looking at this particular domestic challenge, and I would be super happy to plug you in with people that know this sort of stuff and be happy to work with you on it. So in Canada we have about 300 communities that live off-grid, right? And these are small remote communities, and they're primarily indigenous communities. And they rely on diesel fuel, which has to be brought in by trucks, or often on ice roads, or by planes or even barges. And increasingly it has to be flown in by plane when ice roads aren't available, which is happening more and more due to climate change. This fuel is incredibly expensive. They rely on a really aging diesel fuel generation system to produce power. It's not enough. A lot of them live in what's called load restriction status, which basically means the community is using as much power as their generator can put out, right? They can't build new homes. They can't start new businesses. It's a contributor to the housing crisis, which is a contributor to the suicide epidemic, right? So energy, this is sort of that example of that spiral, right? If you don't have that core liberating force that underlies everything else, access to basic human services sort of falls apart, right? And so we have this problem in Canada. It's been persistent for so long. It persists because these people don't have a voice in political systems, but also because they're isolated geographically and we haven't had the technology to connect them to central grids in a way that makes any economic sense at all. But there are new solutions emerging, and I'll talk about solutions in a minute. I think young entrepreneurs can make a big difference in the energy access space broadly, but you know, if I'm speaking in front of a bunch of Canadian students that want to solve this, you know, I would certainly point you in the direction of these communities as people that really need new ideas, and I think there's some real opportunity there. Okay, so let's go to solutions. I think I have like lots of time to talk about solutions, so that's great. So the new sort of paradigm of electrification. I was talking about how it would be so expensive to connect remote communities to the grid. And that's the case not just in Canada, but in the sort of rural poor population globally, which is the primary population segment that I'm talking about. So in the past, we've had large central power plants that would pump out energy and through big transmission infrastructure distribute it to these populations. But that never really made sense for the poorest of the poor living the furthest away from the grid, right? The power lines would go over their head but not connect to them. But that's changing, right? With solar and other technologies that are small scale and can be utilized off-grid, there is a real opportunity to have smaller scale solutions that fit individual communities that are dispersed and can deliver small amounts of energy that meet basic services in really efficient ways and can help them to climb the energy ladder, right? So we're moving from large central to distributed off-grid energy. The metrics are changing from the have-not, the have-not, do you have a plug, you know, are you plugged into the grid or not, to how much energy and what services does it deliver and at what tier of access are you at, right? Are you somebody who has light bulbs in your home but not a TV? Are you somebody who has a refrigerator in your home? This sort of thing. That's how people are starting to think about this. And crucially, that's meant that the actors have changed, right? We're not just relying on big governments and aid organizations, but instead it's become an area for social entrepreneurs to come in, to understand individual communities, what they need, what is their ability to pay for these sort of things, how much do they pay for traditional fuels, and other, you know, how much time do they take, and all of these sort of things, and design really efficient business models around these particular communities that deliver key services that they need at a really low price. And these enterprises are starting to take off all over the world and are changing people's lives all over the place. But it's certainly not not tapped out. We need a heck of a lot more, especially if we're going to make good on eradicating energy poverty by 2030. Which is the Sustainable Development Goal number 7, which I think if we want to meet all the other Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, we better solve this one by like 2025 or earlier, because we need this one to get on the other ones. And this has all kinds of interesting co-benefits that I'll sort of talk about a little bit later, but when first tapping into these sort of markets, these companies are generating credit histories and consumer data for people for the first time, right? They're actually, some of these customers that buy a small solar system are able to get a bank loan after because they've got a history that shows that they've paid off this solar system. Local entrepreneurship opportunities are great, and then there's all sorts of co-benefits for health, education, food security, gender equality, all these sorts of things in these communities. So the new paradigm is enterprise-driven. It's mission-driven enterprises. Think about, you know, Tesla and stuff. Although they're not necessarily a social enterprise, but they're mission-driven, right? They are trying to become financially sustainable, but not because they want to make money, because they need to be able to reach more people, and that's part of the equation. So how the heck are they doing this? So first of all, they're enabled by technology. The challenge this year, and I'm not sure exactly what it's been in other years, but is energy, and energy is a technology-driven space. There's no bones about that. And so we're seeing this sort of revolution in the works because we are having significant price reductions in solar, which is absolutely going to revolutionize developing economies, and also to a lesser but still significant extent our own economy. And there's a huge opportunity around solar paired with the services that it delivers for entrepreneurs to think about. Also, energy storage. A lot of people say, you know, the real difficult thing to deal with in the energy transformation that we have to go through is storage. And some of that is true, but the price of storage has dropped considerably more than most people have thought over the last 5 years, and is a big reason why we're able to sell solar home systems in rural Kenya to people and they can actually afford it. Also, you can't forget about ICT. So when we think about the sort of technology space around energy, and especially renewable energy and the off-grid energy space, it's not just the technology that generates energy, but the technology that manages the system, right? And ICT is a huge enabler of that. So ICT and people having cell phones all over the place is a big part of this, right? Nearly 100% cell phone ownership all over the world. So ICT enables remote monitoring of systems that get sold all over the place, tracking of customers and devices over time, and also mobile banking, right? So what we've seen is this pay-as-you-go model happen in Africa. So if you're going to sell a solar panel to somebody living off-grid who only makes a few dollars a day, if it costs $200, they're not going to be able to buy it up front, right? But they can make small payments over time. The question is, how do they make those payments? And if they're so far away, you're not going to have some place that they're going to walk to every few days and do this. But with mobile banking, where people can send a text message to make a payment, this has freed up the space incredibly, right? So the places where mobile banking is really prevalent are the places where off-grid solar sales have picked up big time in the developing world. And it also allows for customers then, if they have a problem with their system or whatever their energy technology thing is, to send a text message and say, hey, we have a problem, can you send somebody to try to fix it, or what have you. Cool. So some of the other solutions include solar lanterns and pico power, so moving from kerosene lanterns to LED lights. You can go to the next one. The solar home systems that I've talked about, this interesting thing right here is a drone that is actually being tested as a way to bring spare replacement parts for solar systems to remote houses where it's just almost impossible to get there at certain times of the year, right? And so this is something that's being tested right now, but it's sort of an example of the huge space for innovation that there is in this area to try to deal with some of the logistical challenges around getting energy products and services to remote locations. Go to the next one. And then we get to the sort of community scale microgrids kind of thing. So you can go to the next slide. Beyond the solar panel and the battery, you're thinking like, well, I'm not going to invent a new solar panel or battery, right? It's also about the end use appliance that people are using, right? So imagine you've got this like TV thing here and you want to run this off of a solar panel and a battery. If you make this thing twice as efficient in the energy it uses, you only need half the size of solar panel and battery, and you've just made everything, the whole thing, half as expensive, but to deliver the same service, right? So this is a big space that's ripe for innovation right now. There's not a lot of focus going into it. All the big appliance manufacturers and all that, they don't care, right? They don't see that there's a big opportunity of 1 billion people and more that are going to be buying these things once solar gets cheap enough that they really want to plug stuff into it. So there's a huge opportunity to develop these sort of innovations, and I want to mention just cooling, like air conditioning, as one area that's seen very little interest from technology developers, but would make a huge difference and save a lot of lives. You go to the next one. So I think this is sort of the last slide that I want to run through. There's a whole whack of different things on here, and you're like, what is all this? So I'll just talk about a few of them. So. Yeah, the dome one is cool. So the dome one is the dome one is a Canada one. So this is actually a student team from Ryerson University who has developed this social enterprise called Growing North, and they're growing kale and lettuce and all sorts of things like that in Nunavut in these domes. In off-grid communities where food is incredibly expensive, in these places that I was talking about, right? And they actually came to us here at Waterloo and they said, this is great, but we need an energy solution, right? We need to be able to power these things so we can grow energy all year round. Can we work with you guys on this? And so that's just an example that I really like about thinking about, you know, what is something that's really useful to these communities. It's a way to actually grow food themselves so they don't have to have it shipped in or trucked in and cost these ridiculous prices, right? And it relies on energy, right? And that was the big stumbling block that they've faced. So that's one. We also have solar-powered irrigation right here for smallholder farmers. This guy here, so that Mobisol, the drone thing that I was talking about before, they're super awesome. Uche's working with them. Some guy came up to the CEO one day and said, well, solar can't do everything. You know, I bet you can, you know, make a welder. And they did it, right? And so this is a solar-powered welder hooked up to a couple of their batteries, and people can weld things with if they have a solar panel. Above that is the Mobisol CEO came to one of the meetings that we ran a while ago, and this is his consumer data on the screen behind him there. This is like an amazing visualization. They can click on these dots. It's like geography and see all their customers, how big their system are. They can click on an individual customer. They know exactly their repayment history. They realize that a whole bunch of their customers weren't paying their bills during this 4-month period, and recognized, oh, that's because there was a drought and most of these customers are farmers, and so we'll forgive them, right? And we'll let them pay it back later. And that use of data is incredible, I think, and that's the kind of thing that a social enterprise can do. Other ones to mention, the top right here is a picture from I think it's in Somalia, it's a refugee camp. Energy for refugee camps is a big issue right now, and a bunch of people are looking at it, but there's not a whole lot of enterprises in that space. And you'll hear more about Hitch and Uche later. I probably have like 0-ish time left. Yeah, okay. So 1 minute is perfect. So what do I do here? It was mentioned a little bit. So I work at WISE, the Waterloo Institute for Sustainable Energy. We are a meeting place for renewable energy research on campus, and we have all sorts of faculty that are part of WISE. We run events on campus, various things. You should check out the WISE events webpage and come to our lectures and meet some of the awesome innovators, not just from Waterloo, but we have people come from outside all the time. And we also have this initiative called Affordable Energy for Humanity, which I manage, which is a global consortium of universities, social enterprises, and all sorts of organizations that are working on this energy access challenge. And so we run meetings. We've got a proposal in the works to try to get a big chunk of money to be able to send students like you to social enterprises and do internships and actually learn firsthand in Nepal or Kenya or where have you, what it really takes to do this sort of stuff. And I think our mission is also just to try to, what do I want? I want to see a social enterprise that's doing the things on the scale of some of the pictures I was showing there come from the University of Waterloo. So I'm totally, you can bring to the next slide, I'm totally into, yeah, more than one. That would be great, that would be great. More than one would be fantastic. But one would also be fantastic. So I'm totally here to help. That's my email. Let me know anytime. I imagine that you'll need to talk to a lot of people in a short period of time. I'd be happy to put you in touch with folks from the space and from the sector that can give you advice. I'm one of the authors of the report that's at the back there, which we did with the Waterloo Global Science Initiative, and it is a primer on this whole area. Not very technology focused, it's more sort of talking about the sector and that sort of thing, and I'm sure you would find it useful. So there's tons of them, grab one. And yeah.
Great. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you so much for that. No, unfortunately not. So I'm just going to introduce Uche now. Uche has an enduring interest for ICT for development and technology for impact, graduating from Delaware State University and completing an AMP at IESE Business School in New York. Uche graduated from the MBET program in 2016 and is the co-founder of Hitch. I'm going to let you describe Hitch, even though I had a little blurb written, but I think you'll do a better job. And we're so happy to have you here with us today to share a bit more about Hitch's story and provide some inspiration to you guys. Really, as you listen to Nigel and Uche, start thinking about your own ideas. Think about crazy, outlandish things, and then make them realities, is my advice. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Space here? Yeah, you can take that side.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll start just by giving you an overview of what Hitch is, and it's going to be a very fast pitch. In essence, after that, then I'll talk about some of the experiences we've had deploying Hitch in Nigeria. Nigeria is an emerging market. That's where originally I'm from. And we have a live deployment going. And so I explain the connection to energy access then. So in Canada, average monthly income is at least over $200. Average monthly communication spend is over $200. And globally, 1 billion people have only $12 per month to spend on communication. Hitch intelligently delivers content in offline environments for engaging poorly served users. So we take stable broadband for granted, so much so that if our Netflix connection drops, we're frustrated. We often forget that the internet is why we have access to more information than at any other time in human history. 4 billion people don't have the luxury of forgetting and have no more than $12 per month to spend on communication needs. However, if monthly revenue falls below $23 per user, the telcos struggle to serve those users. So connectivity is unavailable or service is unaffordable for them. Not to mention that internet content is largely inaccessible because of literacy barriers. 1 billion Africans and 160 million Nigerians face this problem. So demand for video and rich media content is exploding. Our initial focus is on agriculture in Nigeria with 80 million smallholder farmers. Most belong to 200,000 farming co-ops that drive rural communities. So to address this market, we've built Hitch. Hitch is a smart Wi-Fi hotspot hardware and a content curation cloud platform. Running Hitch software, the Wi-Fi hotspots download videos from the curation cloud, giving users access regardless of internet connectivity. Hotspots cache, then stream videos to multiple users via a Hitch web application running on any Wi-Fi enabled phone. The hotspots can also host third-party applications in offline environments. So our live pilot is in Nigeria, where most broadband usage is via costly mobile data plans. Having lived with poor connectivity and underlying energy deficits, we wanted to make an immediate impact in our tough launch market. Since May 2017, we've deployed 6 hotspots. We now have over almost 21,000 videos viewed, 125 gigs of video delivered for 1,000 users in total. And this represents about 120 megs of video per user, cumulatively $1,000 in savings. So Hitch enables customers reach end users affordably by downloading videos once, serving them multiple times, and bulk purchasing mobile data backhaul. Customers like the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture pay for hardware so that they can curate videos to end users like farmers who can access agriculture, education, health, and even entertainment content via community smart hotspots. Revenues are customer fees for one-time purchase of the hardware to set up, and then monthly analytics access in addition to pay-as-you-go model for the content updates. Current efforts focus on basic connectivity. Unlike our competition, we focus on delivering relevant videos plus scalable revenue share partnerships with community franchisees and leading content producers to deploy smart hotspots to end user clusters. We've worked on a government project delivering useful information to Nigerian farmers since 2012 with 5 decades of combined experience in the space. We have a balanced advisors board across critical strategic areas. And we're currently raising funds to help us to expand to 50,000 users across 60 communities, which would save cumulatively $200,000 every month, annually in mobile data charges. So we started in Nigeria, but our mission includes half the world's population. Thank you. So now I'll give you some, thank you. So I'll give you some context to why energy access is so critical, and like the Hult Price has said, energy is the lifeblood of humanity. So I worked on a startup with a similar context, concept to the one I'm working on in Abuja, Nigeria for 5 years. And it failed primarily because of significant access to energy costs. for development in terms of the technology team, admin in terms of the back office and the business, and even for operations for the field deployment. It was the same idea, delivering content, making it affordable for people to connect to the internet. Ultimately, this affected our ability to source for and compensate the best talent, not to talk of being able to attain sustainability for the venture. I moved to Waterloo not quite 3 years ago, and I restarted the startup from scratch. With the access to energy dynamics here, which is very ubiquitous, our venture, in essence, the difference between what happened in Nigeria and what has happened in Waterloo is essentially that access to energy. So here, I don't have to worry about energy for development or for admin, only for operations, because my target market, my launch market, is still in Nigeria, and it's still affected by the energy access challenge. So it's the same environment with the same issue, but now we can serve it from an environment that has energy access as opposed to one that doesn't have it. Now, while I'm here, while we're doing work, we're doing tech work, we're doing development work, anything that we're doing to support operations in Nigeria, I don't have to worry about energy. Communitech or Velocity worries about that. So as for the energy access focus faced by our Nigerian deployments, we designed around this from the beginning because we knew we were going to face it. And as an imperative, we included a renewable energy solution consisting of solar and battery as a core component of the final launch product. However, our current MVP launch in Nigeria, and most of you are going to learn about that, you're going to learn about MVPs and deployments because we're building hardware, we didn't completely finish the renewable energy component, and so we had to rely on the grid. So 2 Hitch units were reported offline many times, and we couldn't understand what was going on. On closer inspection, we found out that staff at the locations where the units were deployed essentially unplugged them so that they could charge their mobile phones. And we dug deeper trying to find out, okay, so why are you unplugging it to charge your phone? Can't you charge it at home? But this is because they don't, when they leave work, when they finish that shift and they go home, there's no energy. So the only place they can charge their phone is while they're at work. So as the Hult price puts it, energy is the lifeline of humanity. And so out of 15 planned Hitch deployments, this energy instability damaged 2 test units, delayed 7 more from being deployed, and significantly reduced the uptime, usage, and engagement with the product. So out of 15, if we had done all of them, we have 20,000 plus users, videos delivered to 1,000 users. If we had more, we would actually be able to serve a lot more people. So out of 15 deployments, we could only do 6. So Hitch is actually more dependent on energy than on connectivity to deliver its minimum impact, even at scale. This is because we factored in an offline mechanism for updating the video content, retrieving the data and analytics, but without energy, users cannot charge the Wi-Fi enabled devices to receive the content, nor can the Hitch Smart Wi-Fi hotspot deliver its streaming payload. So in essence, the teams, or those of you who are looking at the Hult challenge, have to think broad, and that's why I'm so happy when I saw the design thinking session, because you have to break the frame of what you think is possible in looking at these challenges. University of Waterloo is privileged because you have a whole number of institutions, both from the entrepreneurship standpoint, like the Conrad Center, without which Hitch wouldn't have happened, the Waterloo Institute for Sustainable Energy, and affordable access for affordable energy for humanity WISE that Nigel talked about, without which Hitch deployment in Nigeria wouldn't have happened. Basically, they paid for that deployment. So you need to tap into all the resources that you have here in thinking about this challenge and this space. And while Nigel is right, there are also communities here facing the same types of challenges as those communities that are abroad. But it's just about thinking about it in a different way, breaking the frame about what you think is possible in those models, and creating those new systems and innovations that would definitely not just win the Hult Prize, because like I said, I was talking to Nigel earlier, I said, Waterloo has to win the Hult Prize. If not for anything, WISE, WGSI, AE4H, Conrad, everything is here, and you're then plugged into global networks around the world. Give you a very brief example. In June, there was an innovation lab that AE4H organized in Potsdam, Germany, my first time in Germany, and WISE sponsored me to the trip. And this was happening around the same time I had just left Nigeria, and we had done the deployment. So we're facing the energy access challenge, and we needed a solution. So right there in that conference, the CEO of Mobisol was actually there. And so I walked up to him, fellow participants, we got talking. As a result, we're now looking at collaborating for them to supply the solar energy to power our hotspots. And so that kind of global connection, I think from what our discussions were, I think they have about 100,000 users right now using the systems. They've probably raised about $20 million in capital. It's not a small company, but I was able to get to talk to him, get a solution going, got a partnership going, all because of the types of connections that the community here in Waterloo has to offer. So I would tell you, pick your team members, think about the problems, but don't ever be daunted by the complexity of the challenge, the difficulties, because you have all the resources that you need to make this possible. Thank you.
That was incredible. Thank you so much. Okay, so how's everyone feeling right now? Good, excited still? Still excited? Yeah, that's a lot of content and amazing content, but like they both said, please reach out to them. We're going to go to a Q&A at the end where you can ask them questions as well as Jade and Keith from Epoch. But before we go to the Q&A, we're just going to invite them to come up and speak about their experiences, give you guys a student in-look, it's not even an outlook, into the problem and the Hult challenge. Yeah, please welcome them up.
Hello, I'm Jade. This is Keith. We're actually siblings as well. This is my brother. So yeah, it's really incredible seeing everyone here because we were in your exact same position just a year ago, which is quite interesting. But the challenge we were addressing last year was the migration crisis. So we developed Epoch, which is a platform that connects refugees and newcomers with their local community members.
Oh, okay. So we developed it. It's really interesting looking at, I guess, our trajectory because, like many of you can know, like a lot of the issues that you may be facing with social entrepreneurship is in the developing world, and that's where we started first. We were like, oh, we'll work with refugees in Thailand, but then we realized that as we moved on, we didn't have resources to be on the ground to really learn, refugees there. And so we just kind of worked with the refugees in our local communities. And we actually went from working in the developing world to the developed world. So I think a really interesting point that was raised is that there are actually great energy issues, even just in Canada. So I would definitely encourage you guys to go out there because they're right here and you can go on the ground, and that sort of learning is invaluable. What else should we be talking about?
What has it meant to you?
Oh, yeah, so it's been an amazing experience. So I think we were able to really lift off our startup with Hult's, I guess, backing. I think the biggest value you can get from Hult is its network and its huge recognition around the world. So we definitely would not have accelerated our development as quickly without being part of the Hult Prize. We are now actually a real startup, so that's really exciting. And yeah, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, it's been an incredible learning experience because we went from the local round to the London, because I don't know what it is like this year, but then after the local round, you go to one of the 5 regionals. So we chose London, which is really exciting for us. We didn't know we would win that round, but we did, which is really incredible. And then we went on to the accelerator, which is an incredible learning experience as well. We basically lived with the 5 other finalists, but I think this year there's 50 of you guys, which is crazy. But you learn so much, even throughout our entire experience of developing from the local round to going to the regionals. We knew we wanted to keep it going even if we did not win the regionals, because up to that point, you learned so much about your market and validating your customers or even developing and testing it out. So even before we won regionals, we're already going to volunteer with a refugee camp in Munich and everything, but that just helped further our learning in the accelerator when we did win.
And I think one last point to stress is the ecosystem in Waterloo. If you look at, I guess, the people who's helped Epoch grow to it now, I think we literally have talked to every single department in all of the university. So from I guess, peace building departments to Conrad, to Velocity, to Greenhouse. If you look at it, I think you can find everyone at University of Waterloo, and it'll be surrounding Epoch.
Yeah, I don't know. Thank you.
Actually, you can stay standing up here. Okay, so thank you so much, Keith and Jade, for being here. We're actually going to now transition into a Q&A. We see some faces that have absorbed a lot and wheels are turning, but the alertness level can be amped up a little. So now we're going to give you a chance to ask some questions to our speakers that are here from EPOC, as well as from Uche and Nigel. So if we could move towards the Q&A area. Not you guys, but we have set up a little space here. And Pragya will be moving around with a mic. So we have some questions that I would like to also ask, but we're going to open it up to you guys. From anything that you've heard today or things that you're thinking about as you start this journey, are there any questions you have for our guests today? Oh yes, perfect. So we have Nigel, who's here, of course. We have Uche, we have Team EPOC, Jade and Keith, and that pretty much sums it up. Hi.
Hi. Is this working?
Is it on?
Okay.
There you go.
Thank you all very much. My question is for Uche. So I am Nigerian, and I can relate to so many of the things that you shared. I'm wondering if you've thought about any of the applications for H to other sectors. So healthcare, for example. Like immediately, my mind goes to it's probably a great way to boost the knowledge of healthcare workers in remote areas, for example. So I'm just wondering if you've thought about that.
Okay, thank you very much. So one of the things that we were able to figure out quickly, even while we were going through the Embed program. So I went into Embed with the idea for H, got all the support, met my technical co-founder there, and we launched it. We figured out very quickly that we had something you guys would probably, either you know about or you're going to learn about, problem-solution fit. So we had a problem, we had a solution. We figured that out quickly. But what has been tougher to do now is product-market fit. So you have a product, and what you're describing is what industry do you go into. So initially, the premise was we had this project we're working on for agriculture. The government was interested in teaching farmers and educating farmers in rural areas. It made sense. Government would pay, the farmers would get the devices in local areas, and then they'll receive it in a community setting. But the buying process, you then find out about that again. The buying process for those decisions, from when you make the presentation or do anything, engagement, do the demo and all that, to when you actually get a check, is longer than expected. So we went in thinking from MVP, from when we launched, we're probably 6 months. Right now, it's probably looking at 12 to 18 months. So we have to, part of what we're doing, even in Velocity, is figuring out that product market fit. But what is interesting about what you said is the other industries and the whole bunch of industries that you can look at that this is applicable to, what is important for us is which industry makes sense. So strategy we have to follow is not just about what to do, but about what not to do. So which one of these ones is scalable, which one has a business model that will back it up. And one of the interesting things is that we've validated very quickly a product market fit for education. It's interesting that you mentioned healthcare, because our first customer is actually a medical one, and it's a group of doctors in Germany that are doing training for surgeons in Nigeria at a teaching hospital. And so the idea is, and not just the idea, what we've sold them is, well, they can use the devices to do video exchanges, one of actual training to do procedures. So it's an endoscopy surgeon teaching surgeons in Nigeria. He can do videos teaching them how to use the equipment, how to do the procedures. Not only that, they can actually record some of the procedures, and they can send those videos back to him, and then he reviews them. But on a side note, there's also an opportunity that we're looking at and pursuing with a University of Waterloo professor in healthcare, because he wants to teach primary healthcare workers in Nigeria on the ground in rural areas and communities how to help with early childhood development. And this is very critical and actually touches me on a personal level, because the reason I moved to Waterloo was because my son, who was 4 years old at the time, was diagnosed with autism. And so he was on the autism spectrum, and so there was no therapy whatsoever available for him in Nigeria. We tried it for a year, it didn't work, so we had to come to Canada. And so my wife and I are working on a different project to actually provide that type of training, that type of early childhood training for parents or for primary caregivers in Nigeria that have to provide that support, and most of it is video driven. So just to touch on that, it's something we're thinking about. We don't know if it's a sustainable business model, but it's something that we're passionate about, and maybe that's something that we'll pursue under our own CSR obligations. Thank you.
Anyone else with a question? Pragya has the mic.
Hello. Yeah, hi. Actually, I'm very interested in this in the Hult prize competition, and I just wanted to know, like, what is the objective of the Hult's of the $1 million? Okay, is it supposed to be like for funding a self-sustainable business, like which will eventually generate money by like the $1 million will be a starting point and then it will generate money and be a self-sustaining model, or is it like just helping people? You know, like you have some novel idea of helping people, or
Former than the latter. It's meant to, the way
Okay.
Hult describes it is this thing on? Yes. Is as seed funding for your venture. Epoch, would you add anything to that? Does that?
Yeah, so like a huge part in Hult, right?
One sec. Sorry, Keith.
Is making a sustainable business model. So it's not for you to to use as charity money. It's for you to fund your business and to help it grow. Essentially, it's not for you to really just give out as earnings, but it's for you to sustain your business. Like you have to prove that you have a good business model, that your concept's going to help a lot of people, and so they give you that $1 million to help that 10 million people, essentially.
And on a technical note, they take 20% for the $1 million, and they distribute it based on milestones that you establish when you guys win. So it's, for example, like the first milestone you reach, they'll unlock $250,000, and then you figure it out with them after.
Anyone else? Oh, so sorry. Do you want to just pass this around?
So my question is for Epoch. When you guys were first presented with the idea, how do you guys know where to start? Because it's so open-ended and it's broad. How do you guys know where to narrow down to?
So yeah, when we were faced with that challenge of coming up with an idea, it was a lot of reading and research and learning more about the problem itself and all facets of it. Because, for example, ours was for the migration crisis, so there's a lot of parts of the journey, so it was up to us to kind of learn more about each one and each part of it and kind of dive into it and see how we can come up with an idea, guys.
Yeah, so it's kind of like you're going to go through kind of like a funnel, I guess, if you imagine how it looks. Like in the beginning, you're going to learn about everything and you see the whole picture. It's going to be a little bit overwhelming, but then you start kind of like filtering down to your scope. And then, so I think like the best advice I got was try to understand the problem holistically at first, spend like maybe 1 or 2 weeks just reading everything you can on it, and then figuring out what problems that one individual would experience, and if you can solve that one problem for them, there's a really good chance that other people may also have that problem. And then you go back up a little bit and see if that problem actually is as widespread as you think, and then, yeah, you go back up and down.
Any other questions? Follow for anybody who hasn't asked a question yet, just to give people a chance. Yeah? We'll come back to you.
Thank you. My question's for Epoch as well. How did your team come about, and what are some characteristics that you think made you successful?
So yes, Keith's my brother. So at the time, he was an alumni actually, so you're allowed 1 alumni on your team, so that was perfect for us. And then I just went ahead and invited my friend who I recently finished a co-op term with, just because we worked well together. And then our last member was our friend. So we kind of just came together as friends, and I think that was good for us because we had to spend many hours together, just days on end. So hopefully you guys will like each other, so it'll be fine. But I think that was important for us to be able to bounce ideas off of each other and work well together.
Yeah, and just people that you feel comfortable with. Like, you don't want to be in an environment where you feel like you don't want to put an idea in because you might think it's a bad idea, or you might get, made fun of. Really, just have a safe space of the 4 of you. I think it's 4 people, right, this year as well? Yeah, it's 4. 3 to 4 people. Yeah. And then, so technical people are also very important. We struggled finding technical people later on in the stage. Yeah, but I think it's kind of normal because we didn't have an idea in the beginning. So, but just keep that in the back of your mind that you might need someone technical, and that might be really important. Okay. So the technical person was also from the University of Waterloo. So go back to the ecosystem here and find your technical team.
So yes, interesting for us, our team kind of evolved as we went through Hult Prize because it is a year-long process. So not everyone on our team expected to go as far as we did. So one individual had to leave, so we had space for a 4th, and Hult Prize is super flexible. So how we did fill in the last I guess, fourth member was I just reached out to university professors to see if anyone was interested in joining our initiative, because at that point we already had our idea. We were entering the accelerator. It was around April at that point. So we had people interested, and we just found something that was a good fit for us.
My question is for Uche. I know that your entire team is not based here in Waterloo. Did that cause any difficulties, and if so, how did you get past them?
Okay, yeah. So I guess the easy answer to that is communication, right? So whether you're in the same location or you're not in the same location, you have to communicate. So everybody has to know what everybody else is working on and how it fits into what the milestones of the business are. But I think the critical part for me was back to the question that they just answered, was how do you even find and add people to your team? So the team dynamic is also very critical. And so for us, once you have the communication going, there's even an article online where it talks about using Slack and those types of channels, virtual channels, to keep in touch, and making sure that even during the day while you're working, there's that communication flow going on. And at a minimum, have at least one day where you have a video conference call where everybody is talking to everybody face to face. If you have opportunities to also do meetups, that's also very important. I guess also because target market isn't launching here in Canada, it was launching in Nigeria, there was still the need for, even if we were all here in Canada to begin with, someone would actually have to go to Nigeria and oversee the deployment of the operations there. So having that in the back of our minds from the beginning was very important. So you have to build the building blocks into it, and then goes back to what they talked about in terms of being comfortable with the people you're working with, so that when the challenges come, and there will be challenges, you can surmount them. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead, Sebastian.
Thank you. My question is for Epic, and I'm just wondering, after you got your idea, after you have your team, those things nailed down, how do you really make sure you're prepared in all the other aspects, all the more technical aspects, all the things you need to prepare before to be ready for the actual competition, so that you can impress the people and be ready for the next step?
So I think it comes in stages. The first stage, I think, for the regional and the local round, you really want to, I guess, make sure you have a right product market fit. I think it's most impressive. You're able to really understand your problem and able to talk about it in a real way. And so I think the best way to do that is to talk to people and talk to as many people as you can that's in the market. I think when we first started, I fell into the trap of I love reading, so I just kept reading things online and thinking, oh, this is the problem, I get it. And then you go out there and then you find out that it could be totally different, practically speaking, versus, I guess, theoretically when you read.
Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing that you did say, it's like, how do you prepare for the competition? Because I think the local and the regional round is very much about the pitch as well, but the pitch is a byproduct of all the findings and experience you've had on the ground and speaking with people. So be mindful of that, not falling to the trap of just preparing for the pitch itself, but making sure you actually have done the background research, because Q&A is very essential. It was what we found as well. Q&A basically makes or break you as well. Like in the London round, our experience was Q&A kind of helped us educate the judges on what we actually experienced and our findings. Another key thing that we learned from our regional round in London was the fact that they were looking for a team that they deemed they were able to mentor in the accelerator. So that's something to be mindful as well. Like, have an open mind when you get feedback.
Thank you. That's great advice, and it's nice to now get into some of the more practical questions for those of you who will be participating in Hult, which is the majority of you in this room. And so I would like to throw in a question actually for Nigel, and then possibly Uche, if we have time for my two questions. And the question for Nigel relates to something that I've been reading in that Hult booklet, which is, it's interesting, this year the 2018 Hult Challenge actually doesn't ask for brand new technologies. It's a bit of a different challenge even compared to last year, obviously for a few reasons, but one of them is that they're not asking you to invent brand new things, but it clearly states in that document that they are looking for people to understand and look at current renewable technologies and what the trajectory looks like into the future. And there's some really interesting ideas in there if you span the different focus areas in terms of water and food and looking at what the future of food even looks like. It's quite interesting, the case examples they have, and you will dig into that over the next week. But coming back to my question to Nigel, what I wanted to ask is, you talked about in your presentation leveraging current technologies, and one of them that kept coming up in the images was solar technology. So do you have advice for students, whether it's in solar or other renewables, in terms of how they can start to leverage the local partnerships and the existing businesses in this space that we can start to partner with to serve this challenge?
Okay, so when you say partner with other businesses, do you mean sort of like on the ground in these sort of places, or do you mean
either or even here to start in terms of the connections that can help us kind of step off into?
Okay, well, I mean, first of all, yeah, I would say you're right that, like I said, energy is a very tech-driven sort of space. But social entrepreneurship, so much of it is about business model development and that side of things, right? And you don't have a lot of time. You can't invent a new battery or solar panel. So yeah, and that's not what they're looking for. So you're trying to sort of, I think what you're trying to do is find a niche where, if you could imagine that energy technology exists, right? The solar panel, the battery, whatever. The question is, what's it going to do for people, and how is that going to drive local development? So in terms of looking at local partners and stuff, you want to, I mean, I would imagine, like we've talked about Nigeria and communities in Northern Ontario and Nunavut and all these different places. I think it might make sense to eventually narrow down to a geographic scope. Try to find some organizations that are working in impoverished communities and communities that have economic development challenges, and try to see what the basic services that people are lacking are, what the major revenue stream of people in that community are. And a lot of the business models that sometimes, like, people will send to us, some random social enterprise that wants to do, they'll be tied to that end use. So somebody recently sent me something on trying to get refrigerators to a fishing community in Yemen, right? And it's an energy access business, sort of, but what's the starting point for it? It's not designing a solar-powered refrigerator. It's understanding that if people have refrigeration in this community, they will be able to store their fish for longer, send it to markets where they can make much more money out of it. So it's about understanding that local economic development cycle, and where, if you put a bit of pressure on it, the wheel would start to turn.
Yeah.
So just to add to that, and that's one of the benefits of being in Waterloo, is that even the university itself already has a whole ton of research done and innovations developed. When we're in Embed, we had someone from the Watco office come talk to us. I'm sure David Rose can probably put you in touch with them. The university has a whole bunch of technology already there that you have to find applications for, and that, like Nigel is saying, is a business model, business innovation type of challenge. So the technology really is, it's just like when I got to Waterloo initially, and I had this idea for Hitch. Everybody I met said, forget about the tech. We can build the tech. That's not the problem. It's the business. So what is the business model? What's the case? What is going to drive this entire thing? And one other thing to think about when you're talking about energy access and all that, is to think about the models that also unlock a lot of potential. So one could be, we just deploy something and the technology works and it has an impact. But it's also something where there's a lot of data and analytics. He mentioned it about Mobisol. It's also something that we are finding out, that the data actually is a potential way to innovate in your business model to cross-subsidize or pay for some of the services that you need to roll out. So that in itself opens a different chapter in terms of thinking about, and that's all about breaking your mind design thinking about how you can probably build a sustainable business in energy access, even when you're targeting bottom-of-pyramid users.
Just one of my examples that I didn't have time to talk about is a business model innovation like that. It's from an organization called Sunny Money now, I think is what they're called. And their innovation, they sell solar lights, which are all over the place, and they haven't invented a new solar light, but they're the best at selling solar lights, because they realize that just going into villages and trying to sell them with a salesperson who's from somewhere else isn't really working, right? People don't necessarily trust that person. There's a problem with products that are faulty or from they're not high quality, and so they decided that they were going to try to engage teachers who have like status within communities that people trust and teach them how to sell these things, right? And they had huge success with that. And that's a business model innovation that really unlocked millions more customers, right? And it's not reliant on the technology at all. Technology is already there. The question, and I think that's something that you can just sort of take for granted with a lot of this sort of stuff, that the technology is there at a reasonable price point. The question is, how do you get it to people and how do you make it do something useful for them, right?
Fantastic. I think that's a great note to wrap up the Q&A on, because this is the kind of thing that people will be grappling with, is looking at how do we tap into the business model innovation when the technologies exist. We're not reinventing any wheel, so to speak, but it's how do we deploy this and help achieve access. So as we wind down, just a few quick things on our agenda, and I'm saving the best and most exciting for last. And so what I'm going to do quickly is, actually you want to do, sorry, Pragya is going to tell us about next steps. I'm going to do a quick vote of thanks and then hand it over to Mark Weber to say, to make a quick announcement.
Okay, so we've heard, well, thank you again, sorry. We've heard a lot about the challenge, and I definitely think step one, go download that, do all the reading, like Keith said. There's a wealth of information there. They spent a lot of time doing all the research, all the preliminary research for you, so definitely take advantage of that. That'll show in your pitches. I was watching a lot of the semifinal pitches last time, and I could tell, I was like, this team never even read the pitch. I know they didn't. They don't even know what they're talking about. So don't do that. Once again, shameless self-promotion. Please like our page. It's also really for you. You're going to get all the updates through that. We have the website for you to register from. To download the challenge, it is up on the Facebook page. You can also just Google Hult Prize 2018 Challenge. It'll show up. I think that's all. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email me, Facebook message me, anything at all. I'm here to help you. I can try to introduce you to the amazing people in this room that I hopefully know. Yeah, and then I'll pass it back to Rupa.
Thank you, Pragya. Let's give her a round of applause. She's been working quite hard. Despite her busy schedule, and she's dealing with lots of emails from me, so. But hopefully that PDA made up for it, right, Pragya? Okay, so I just wanted to do a quick kind of vote of thanks. I know this is just the kickoff and we're just getting started, but a saying that I love is that love is in the details, and there was a lot of both love and details in planning and organizing this event. And many people have talked about the amazing ecosystem that is Waterloo. So first I'll thank our speakers, so Team Epoch, Keith and Jade, for making time to be here despite their crazy busy schedule, you know, leading into and post-final. So thank you. To Nigel, who also not only kind of put together his presentation, but literally kind of in the 11th hour was running around campus trying to help us solve our tech issues. And I told him that I didn't even remember to bring a Conrad t-shirt as a thank you, but we can get you one of those. But we really appreciate you making the time and helping kind of paint the landscape of the competition for our students. So thank you. To Uche, who is a beloved member of the Conrad community. As soon as I joined Conrad a few months ago, I kept hearing about Uche, and it was like, who is this Uche? And when I finally met him, I understood why everybody loved him so much, and we've only met a few times, but it's been such a wonderful interaction, so thank you for being here and sharing the context of Hitch. Uche's interested in mingling with some of you after and also potentially doing a bit of a demo if there's time for that as we wrap up. So those of you who are interested in learning a bit more about Hitch and Uche, you are welcome to stick around for that. So thank you, Uche. We'll give him a round of applause. And finally, I'll list this group. You don't have to clap for each of them. We can clap in some for all of them, but all of the colleagues who have supported this and will continue to. So there have been people that I've just met a few months ago who have helped so much. So people like Tanya Delmato at Greenhouse, Krista at Velocity, and they're all here. Haley Rutherford, who was introduced to me by Tanya. Who else is here? Paul is not here. Paul Heidebrecht for the Center for Peace advancement. He has class right now, but he's been quite supportive and helpful. Colleagues at Conrad, I see David is here, David Rose is here tonight, who many of you have heard of. Pamela and Lindsay on the marketing side have put up with lots of the details as well, so we really appreciate the support. Netta Vasir has made it today, even though she is here she is on her mat leave, and she was responsible for running the Hult events in collaboration with Pragya last year and teaching Bet 420, so we're really happy that you took the time to be here. Am I forgetting anybody? It's quite likely, but I hope not. I don't think so. Basically, there's a large ecosystem here, and we appreciate all of your support. No, Mark, I'm not forgetting you, don't worry. And to all the Bet 420 students who are in for the long haul, so to speak, this semester, who have been so open and flexible and critical in the classroom already these last few weeks. You guys make all of this so worthwhile, so thank you for being along for the ride, and I can't wait to see what you all come up with. To the MBET students and everybody else who's taken the time to be here and consider Hult, we thank you as well. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. All right, so last but not least, I would like to invite the director of the Conrad Center for Business, Entrepreneurship, and Technology, Mark Weaver, up to have some final words and to make an announcement. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Rupa. It's exciting to see all of you here for all sorts of reasons. I'm basically just going to say two things and make one announcement. So the first thing is, Nigel, we'll get you 2 Conrad shirts so that you can launder one in the off days, okay? So that would be great. Tremendous content today. The second thing to say is the Conrad Center, if you're not familiar with it, is the engine of the academic engine of entrepreneurship at the University of Waterloo. We see it as our mission to equip people like you, young people like you, who are starting to find your path in life, to explore how entrepreneurship might play a role in that, to equip you to make better decisions, to assess opportunities, be more effective. One answer to the question, what should you do if you feel overwhelmed? Well, that's obvious. Take a Conrad course. Our faculty are, how many of you here are associated with Conrad in some way? Do your faculty care about your success? Bet 420 and so on. We're deeply, deeply committed to your success, and we want to be helpful. You are extraordinarily lucky. You are amazingly bright people. You wouldn't be in this room at the University of Waterloo if that were not true. You are in an extraordinary ecosystem with incredible people who are willing to share their expertise. You have access to untold technologies around this place that professors don't have time to make use of, and you can build a business case around to change the world. We define entrepreneurship at Conrad as making new things happen. You are learning about the world you live in. You're here because you want to make that world better, and we want to support you in that. And so to that end, I would like to announce that the winning team of the University of Waterloo competition will have us pay all of their expenses for travel and accommodation to go to the regional finals wherever it is in the world you may end up going, all right? So that's what we want to offer you. Within reason and not business class. Remember, we are a public institution. I think I do want to draw very quick attention to one other thing, because right now you could be feeling a little bit daunted and overwhelmed and thinking, oh my God, how do you even begin to start? And I think it's worth pointing out that there were 6 regional finalists last year. One of them was Team Epoch, right? University of Waterloo students. One of the other teams was from York University, and guess what the technology platform for their entry was? Hitch, Uche. So in other words, the University of Waterloo was substantively responsible for 1/3 of the regional finals winners last year. And I mean, just to be clear, Team Epoch over there in London, the good news is that their competition wasn't really all that steep. They only had to defeat teams from MIT and Harvard and Berkeley. And they're an amazing group, but I have no doubt that there's another amazing group out there waiting to change the world and make us proud. So I'm looking forward to seeing that happen.
Thank you so much for that. I'm kind of jealous because as a campus director, I don't get to compete. So if anyone wants to take my role and let me compete instead, I would love an all-expense trip paid to anywhere in the world. That's it for us. You guys feel free to find your teams, start reading the challenge right now, talk to each other, talk to our wonderful speakers. And if you are interested in any of the design workshop or speed networking, please come up to me and sign up for that. Thank you very much.